Okay, another highly requested shoe today. We're going to be chatting through the Qiaodan Leili Plaid, or the TG Plaid you might have seen, which is a tall super trainer, carbon plated, stiff and stable. I think this is going to be a good option for long runs, extended tempos, first time racing shoe as well. So I do think this is going to have a fair few applications for a lot of you out there. We're going to chat through things top to bottom, chat about the price, and get into a few Western comparisons as well to help you understand exactly what this shoe is about. Getting straight into some specs, we've got 47mm of foam here in the heel with an 8mm drop down to 39 in the forefoot. 5mm of that stack is made up of this supercritical insole, which is a nice plush, soft, kind of bouncy foam. A bit of an upgrade over your standard kind of ortholite, thin, flimsy midsole, which I think is a nice touch there. The rest of the midsole is made up of two very contrasting foams. We've got a top layer of TPEE, which is their Kung Fu Pro compound. Very soft, compressive, compliant, great word to describe it. I would say this is sitting somewhere between Light Strike Pro in the Adios Pro 4 and Incredi Run in the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2. Bit firmer than Incredi Run, a little bit softer than Light Strike Pro. A nice, smooth, compressive TPE feel there. On the bottom layer, we have one of the firmest, hardest foams that I've felt in the last couple of months. Supercritical EVA, which is pretty firm to the touch, has a really nice dense feel to it. Adds a bit of structure to the shoe and is a nice kind of contrast to that top softer layer. In between the two layers of foam, we do have this slotted carbon plate or carbon sheet. Not even sure if it's carbon, to be honest. It does look a little bit fake, but it is still stiff. It is still doing the same job, reinforcing the rock ring through the forefoot and allowing for this lateral cutout to hold its shape, which I think is, good enough. In terms of the weight in my men's size 10.5, 296 grams, I think is decent enough considering the stack and the amount of components here. That's pretty relevant to other shoes like the Hyperion Max 3 Endorphin Trainer, which I think are in a kind of similar category to this one. Upper wise, it's a pretty simple setup. Nice stiff heel counter, moderate level of padding around the heel counter. Tongue is quite thin with a little rim of padding just in the kind of last rungs of the laces, just to kind of soften out the feel there. The lacing eyelet chain is quite narrow, I would say. So what I mean by that is that there is a fair bit of upper material either side of the lacing eyelet chain, which means that it is quite a high volume fit, or at least you can expand it out and make it quite high volume. That's going to be music to the ears of a lot of people who have been chasing Chinese models with a bit of a roomier feel, bit of extra volume. I think this is going to be a shoe which I can recommend to wider footers, even a wide footer perhaps. 2E I think could work if it is specifically in the midfoot that you're having problems. Toe box wise, it's okay. It's not exceptional on that lateral side, but I think it's standard enough that if the midfoot volume is the problem, we could get away with a slightly wider foot in this shoe. The mesh that makes up the rest of the upper is quite breathable, feels like quite a durable material, fair bit of overlays to it as well, which give it a good deal of structure. Locking down this upper is very easy. You kind of rely on the stiffer heel counter back there, work your way forwards. Very easy to find a consistent fit. One thing I would say is that if you have a narrow foot, this one might not be the best. As you can see, it's already quite close on what I would say is a standard foot for myself. If you have a narrow foot, you might end up cinching the laces all the way together, which might not be ideal for you. So narrow footers maybe not, but wider footers, this could be an option to jump onto as long as you don't have a really wide foot in the toe box. In terms of the actual sizing, I've gone for a size 10.5 here, which actually matches up with my Western brands, Nike, Saucony, Asics. I would say I have a bit of extra room compared to them, maybe a quarter size long, not quite that half size long, which would have me going down to a size 10 like I usually do. I have found that to be quite consistent with Qiaodan. I went for a size 10.5 in the Leili 1.0 as well, and I found that to be a good fit also. So I would suggest going with your normal size if you haven't had a whole lot of experience in Chinese brands. If you float between half sizes and you don't mind having a bit of a shorter toe box, perhaps you could go the half size down, but my recommendation would just be to go with your standard Western size. In terms of the midsole, things get a bit more interesting here. We've got a lot of different components coming together. Kind of hard to chat about it all at once, so we'll start with some broad terms. This midsole feels dense, protective, stable, stiff and rocketed, and really quite smooth once you get a bit of force into it. I think this is going to be a really nice long run option, a nice protective tempo trainer, and as I mentioned, a potential option for first time marathoners, especially if you're a heavier bloke and need a bit more protection underfoot, a bit more depth of cushion. You need something which is going to hold up for a longer time on feet. I really like how the combination of foams work together. You get this kind of softer sink in with the Kung Fu Pro up top, and just as you're about to bottom that out, you get the interaction with this firmer layer of supercritical EVA on the bottom, which I think gives the shoe its kind of depth and meat. The kind of guts of the rebound comes from that, and it works together to give a really nice healthy rebound, which comes in kind of a different pace. The initial sink in is quite smooth and slow, but the rebound is quite quick, quite punchy, and has a bit of extra force behind it. That combines with the rock ring of this shoe quite nicely, reinforced by the carbon plate of course, to give a really smooth propulsion, which I think is especially good in the late stages of your run when you need something to keep the legs ticking over. I don't think it's the fastest, it's not the kind of most poppy and energetic, but it does have this kind of smooth, controlled, mechanical rebound, which I think will keep you moving in the late stages of your run, in the late stages of your race, especially if you can keep putting a bit of force into it and engage all of the layers of the foam and that geometry at the same time. I do think lighter runners might struggle a bit in this one. I think that they will get that kind of initial squish with the Kung Fu Pro, but I don't think they're going to take advantage of the bottom layer as much. I do think you need to put just a bit of extra force, whether through your weight or with a bit of extra pace, in order to kind of wake that foam up and get a bit of compression and get a bit of extra kind of energy return from it, which might be lacking if you're sitting back in kind of zone 2, really just ticking the legs over. For me, I found this to be a good daily trainer. Zone 3, long run, bit of tempo stuff, but to be honest, it's not exactly my style for all of those runs. So this was a shoe that I enjoyed when I chose to wear it because I had to get K's in it for review. But personally, if I'm going to be doing a tempo run, I'll probably have something a bit lighter, a bit more nimble underfoot. Same for the long run, and for daily training, I'm probably using something which is a bit more flexible and not as stiff and kind of prescriptive. But I know there's a lot of people out there who like this style of shoe. They like the Hyperion Max 3, Endorphin Trainer, they like the Mega Blast and the Super Blast. They like to feel high off the ground and don't really want to feel the road at all. This is the kind of shoe that you can use for that style of training. In terms of stability here, it's pretty fantastic. There's a lot of different components which come together, including the stiff heel counter for a solid lockdown, big surface area of foam, the lateral cutout instead of the medial one, which I think leaves a nice big wall of foam on the inside edge. Just a bit of extra resistance and kind of security against excess pronation if that's something that you're concerned with. Firmer bottom layer of foam, which makes up a good deal of this heel section, which I think makes for a pretty solid heel strike if that's something that concerns you. Add in the carbon plate, which is just reinforcing all of the geometries here. We've got a pretty solid, stable shoe on our hands. Probably one of the most stable super trainers that I've tried. If you need something to get you through those longer runs with a bit of extra structure, but you do want some elements of the rock ring and propulsion of a super shoe or super trainer, I think this is the one to look at. Overall for me, I think that this is a well executed shoe. Maybe it's not my personal style of trainer, but I think for people who like that big tall feel, want some stability, want some protection underfoot, especially if you have a bit more weight behind you, I think that this is a shoe which I can freely recommend. Adding on to the fact that it does have a bit more room through the upper, I think this would be one of the most popular shoes that I could recommend on the Chinese market. On the outsole, we've got pretty much full coverage CPU rubber, which has been gripping well so far, showing nearly no signs of wear. We do have a bit of exposed supercritical EVA, but honestly, with how firm this feels, I'm not expecting this to wear down very quickly at all, and with it making up a good portion of the midsole itself, I think this is going to be quite a durable shoe. I think it will get you up past that 800k mark, all things going to plan. Coming around to the price point here in Australia, you can pick this up for around about $170 on AliExpress if you want to go through that route, which I think is pretty decent, sitting at about half the price, honestly, of the Endorphin Trainer, the Hyperion Max 3, Neo Vista 2, that kind of big, tall super trainer. It's doing really well there. But if you want to go through Taobao, put in a bit of extra effort, you can pick this up for as low as 110, which is where I found it, which is obviously even better. For that price point, you're getting a lot of stack, a lot of shoe, some really nice technologies, bit of extra room as well, which is a key advantage over some of these other Asian trainers that I've tried. I think that this is a pretty neat buy. If you're looking for that protection, that stability, that structure, and you want a bit of a do-it-all in your rotation. In terms of some quick comparisons, we'll run through a few. Hyperion Max 3 from Brooks I think feels very similar in terms of the kind of density of protection. That's also a shoe which I recommend to people with a bit of extra weight behind them, a bit of extra force in their stride. Does feel a bit different because the Hyperion Max 3 feels more kind of homogeneous. Both layers of the foam feel the same, and it does feel more like a kind of solid piece of foam, whereas you can notice the contrast here in the top layer and bottom layer, which I think makes for more of an interesting ride than the Hyperion Max 3, although I do think you get a bit more bounce out of the Brooks. In terms of stability, this is better with a lateral cutout instead of the medial one on the Hyperion Max, so if stability is your concern, you should go for this one. It is also a bit more relaxed in the upper. It doesn't feel as suffocating as the knit tongue on the Hyperion Max. Saucony Endorphin Trainer, very similar in terms of that top softer layer of midsole foam, very compressive on step in. You get that nice kind of sink in, reinforced by a firmer layer underneath. There is some similarities there, but the flexibility of the Endorphin Trainer, even though it is carbon plated, I do think make it feel a bit more relaxed, a little bit more sluggish compared to this, which is a bit more focused, a bit more mechanical, and a bit more propulsive. I wouldn't want to be wearing the Endorphin Trainer for a full marathon or even a full long run, honestly. It just feels like a kind of hour easy kind of shoe, whereas this has the structure and the propulsion and a bit more of a serious feel, which I think can get you longer runs, deeper into those sessions, and still feel a little bit more secure and a bit more stable. Neo Vista 2 from Mizuno could get brought up as well. I think that is a bit of a different vibe, bit more of an overall soft compressive feel, definitely balances out compared to the firmer bottom layer on the Leili Plaid. I think it feels more rocketed from heel to toe. You kind of sink into the foam, compress through the entire shoe, whereas this is a bit more abrupt in the rocking once you pass the forefoot. This is definitely more stable, definitely a bit more directed in its rebound, whereas I found the Neo Vista 2 could be a little bit mushy, could sink into it a little bit too much. So Easy Days was the main use case for that shoe, but this one I think has a bit more versatility with a bit more guts to it. Also a bit more stable with the heel counter, with the lateral cutout. The Neo Vista 2 doesn't have a heap of structure to the upper at all, and with the compression could be a bit wobbly for some. Last one to mention is the Qiaodan Leili 1.0, which I think is pairing with the Plaid as the kind of more fun-loving, flexible, lightweight daily trainer. It's a little bit more friendly underfoot, doesn't feel as prescriptive and stiff. This is definitely more of that big, tall super trainer vibe, whereas this is like a Nova Blast 5, Rebel V5, but a bit taller and a bit more bouncy, I would say. So far, I have probably enjoyed the Leili 1.0 a little bit more. It's just a bit more fun-loving, a little bit more relaxed. You can head out the door and just get running, and it'll adapt to whatever you really want to do. Whereas the TG Plaid, I feel like you really need to know what you want to do at the start of the run. Do you want to head out for a long run? Do you want to push into zone 3? Do you want to step on the gas and get into some marathon pace kind of reps? You really want to know before you head out. You want to be on fresh legs, whereas this is just that little bit more friendly. I've enjoyed it just that touch more. Bringing that all together, the Qiaodan Leili Plaid, or the TG Plaid, is a really nice, well-rounded super trainer with a bit of extra stiffness, structure, and kind of stability, which I think should work for a fair few people. Although it's not something that I'm personally looking for in my own rotation, I acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of people who are searching for this kind of shoe, who enjoy that big, tall super trainer and want a bit of extra protection underfoot. Big trump card is the extra room through the midfoot here. A lot of people have been waiting for a wider foot recommendation. I think this is it, and it's coming in at a really nice price point as well. So I think this should be a pretty popular model once people can get their hands on it. Let us know if you've tried this one out. How have your experiences been so far? Is there any other shoes that you want me to try in the next couple of months? I've got a few on the way, but open to more suggestions. Yeah, that's pretty much it.